Hello, and welcome back to another day of Mr. Allen's Random Videos. Today, I play tour guide to the picturesque city of Port Washington. I've lived in Port Washington my entire life, and I'm going to give you some mainstays and a little history of the great, grand city that is Port Washington. Here we go! Along the historic Port Washington tour done by Mr. Allen himself is the first stop of the 1860 lighthouse. The lighthouse is the second Port Washington lighthouse. The first one was poorly constructed and relatively cheap. The lantern on the top of it is a fourth order Fresnel lens, which is visible for up to 15 nautical miles and would warn ships of any potential disastrous weather or disastrous conditions. It was active from 1860 to 1903 and then actually became a duplex for the United States Coast Guard and United States Lighthouse Service until about 1991. Could you imagine living there? I don't think I could. It looks haunted. It was then restored in the 2000s and is now on the National Historic Site Register. Moving on. Along our next stop of the Port Washington Historic Tour is the Port Washington Bandshell. The bandshell was built off a donation from Edwin and Mary Janig, and the flag here was painted in 1985. Fun fact about the bandshell is that President Ronald Reagan was here to speak in 1987, where a very adorable, cute, blonde, curly-haired little baby, me, was actually in the audience. I've never actually been on the stage of the bandshell. This is my first time. Oh my God, I feel chills. I'm standing in the same place Ronnie Reagan himself stood. How cool. That looks so patriotic. Any questions? Okay, good. Moving along. Our next stop along the epic and legendary Port Washington tour done by Mr. Allen brings us to the Pebble House, built in 1848. The Pebble House now is known as the Visitor Center, housing the Chamber of Commerce and the Tourism Office. The Pebble House was, however, built by Elizabeth and Edward Dodge, who spent many weeks collecting pebbles along the shoreline of Lake Michigan itself, and then sorting them by color and size. I mean, I love rocks, but could you imagine? That's insane. They built this residential home, and they lived in it, where it is now preserved as another pretty cool building. It is one of the coolest and most original and best built pebble houses in all of Wisconsin. At least that's what I looked up today. So, any questions? Cool. Okay, goodbye. Let's go. Another can't miss stop along the Mr. Allen epic and legendary Port Washington historic tour is this building. This building is the old Ozaukee County Courthouse. Ozaukee County itself was formed in 1853. It used to be combined with Washington County. The Ozaukee County Courthouse site was the site of the Port Washington Civil War draft riots, where Ozaukee County residents rioted against being drafted into the Civil War. In 1900, citizens petitioned to actually make Cedarburg the county seat, where Port Washington had always been the county seat, and there was months of controversy. But Port Washington was voted to retain the seat, and this courthouse was then built and finished in around 1901. Well, then the eagle up on top, and I don't know this for sure, but I really like to think that this is true. The eagle on top is strategically placed so that the butt end of the eagle is facing Cedarburg. As a little ha-ha, we're still the county seat, eat it Cedarburg. Ha, well, I'd like to think that that's true, but I haven't found a source that actually will verify it. And if there's any questions, I would answer them now. Okay, moving on. Another stop here on the Mr. Allen Epic and Legendary Historic Tour brings us to Rotary Park. Rotary Park was built in 1999 from donations by the Rotary Club, Lions Club, Kiwanis Club, and Garden Club here in Port Washington. The pavilion itself in the middle, that it was right there, was donated by Port Washington State Bank, a great company here in Port Washington. Rotary Park is often the site of many fishermen and people just out for a walk on a nice day here in Port Washington. The Rotary Park is also next to the marina, which right now doesn't have very many boats in, but is filled with boats during the summertime. Any questions? Okay, let's go. I don't think a Port Washington historic tour could be done without mentioning Smith Brothers. Smith Brothers is a living, breathing tribute to the fishing industry that was and still is in Port Washington. Smith Brothers used to be a fish shanty and full-scale restaurant for 54 years. They serve freshly caught fish according to their 1941 menu. They served a signature dinner of broiled Lake Michigan trout, fried or boiled walleye pike, choice of smoked fish cocktail, shrimp cocktail or soup, choice of potato salad and vegetable, hot rolls, coffee, tea or milk, choice of dessert for $1. Could you imagine all of that food for $1? Any other questions? Okay, moving on. Our next stop along the Mr. Allen Historic, Epic, and Legendary Tour brings us here, to the pavilion at Coal Dock Park. First of all, Coal Dock Park used to be the scene of an entire large pile of coal. Actually, Port Washington was one of the largest coal import places on the Great Lakes at one point to power the power plant. The power plant, built in 1931, was actually a very large source of jobs and economic growth during the Great Depression here in Port Washington. This pavilion itself is dedicated to a former student of mine who tragically died, Tyler Buchek, and also an acquaintance of mine, Peter Doherty, who both tragically died at the hands of Lake Michigan, which, again, should be noted that Lake Michigan can be dangerous, and taking precautions at times is important. But the Coal Dock Park has now been taken from being a large pile of coal to now being a beautiful and gorgeous park that overlooks the lake. Also found here on Coal Dock Park is the World War II Memorial, to memorialize all of our veterans that have fought and served during times of angst and anxiety in this country. Thank you to all of those who have served. And our next stop on the Mr. Allen Legendary and Epic Port Washington Historic Tour, over my shoulder right here is the most iconic image of Port Washington itself, which is the Port Washington Lighthouse. The Port Washington Pier Head Lighthouse is the opening to the Port Washington Marina, which is also behind me, where you'll find many sailboats and boats in itself during the summertime. You can walk out during the summertime or calm times of the lake to the Pier Head Lighthouse and check out one of the largest bodies of fresh water on Earth, Lake Michigan. The Pier Head Lighthouse was built in 1931. It was an improvement from what was there. It was built in conjunction with the coal power plant, which is right across the way here, which is now natural gas, which helped find people employment during the Great Depression and helped the economy in Port Washington during that time. What a great iconic image to represent our city. We all love the Port Washington Lighthouse. Our last stop on the Mr. Allen Epic and Legendary Port Washington Historic Tour is the building way in the background, St. Mary's Church. This is Mr. Allen's favorite Port Washington landmark. It was built in 1882 and where Mr. Allen got married. A speaker at the 1883 dedication of the building said it is a splendid structure, an ornament not only to the city but the entire state. How cool is that? St. Mary's is also on the National Historic Places Register, and I was once told that St. Mary's clocks look like the eye of God overlooking and protecting the city. What a wonderful way to end another spectacular Mr. Allen's Random Day video. Signing off until tomorrow. Our next stop along the legendary and epic Mr. Allen Port Washington tour. Hey! I'm so cool.